G'day, I'm DK.
And I'm Ardeet.
Thanks for joining us for this week's Two Ticks Town Talk, a segment from the Australia Talks podcast.
Yeah, this is one of our favourite parts of bringing the podcast to you, our listeners.
So please enjoy this segment from the regular podcast.
I've been everywhere, man. I've been everywhere, man. Across the desert, fair man. I've breathed the mountain air, man. I've travelled, I've had my share, man. I've been everywhere.
All right, this week we're travelling over to Western Australia, speaking about minerals and oil-rich areas, to Bunbury. And the growth of this town, which became a city in 1979, echoes the growth of the business we'll be discussing this week, which had its roots in Bunbury. So Bunbury is 175k south of Perth, about 108 miles. European exploration of the area began in the 1650s with Dutch, French, American and British seafarers. The French Bourdin expedition in 1800 mapped the coast and named the estuary Port Leschenault. Lieutenant Henry William St. Pierre Bunbury explored the region in 1836, and in 1838 Governor James Stirling named the town site after him and granted land there. The first European settlers, John and Helen Scott and their family, arrived that same year to establish a farm. Early trade involved supplying fresh meat and veggies to North American whaling ships, and shipwrecks such as the Samuel Wright in 1840 actually provided salvaged materials for building, which I suppose it has silver lining, but yeah, not good for the ship. But you can understand, don't let it go to waste. Growth accelerated with convict labour, and they came in and they drained swamps and built a timber jetty, made roads and bridges. And then the South Western Railway linked Bunbury to Perth in 1893. And of course, the gold rushes of the 1890s brought further development. So Bunbury became a municipality in 1871, a town in 1961, and then a city in 1979. So it's pretty quick. You know,
That's so quick. Just
very.
boom, boom, boom.
Yeah, boom, boom, boom. Exactly right. In fact, it's West Australia's third most populous city. So in 21, it had a urban population of just shy of 80,000, and it's the main regional centre for the southwest area down there. So it depends on mining, mineral processing, agriculture, timber, the port, retail, services, and tourism. And the local mob there, the Wandandi Noongar people, are part of the broader Noongar cultural bloc. They've lived in the southwest area for more than 45,000 years, and they know the area as Gumburup. And the Gumburup area was a seasonal gathering place. It was rich in food sources and ceremonial sites, and early Europeans noted large groups of Aboriginal people in the region. So after colonisation, there was the usual differing views of land use that led to clashes and marginalisation. It sounds trite when we say it, but we say it so often. But that's the reality. There's a lot of Aboriginal people employed in the growing town, but they had controls placed on their movement, marriage, and employment. But the Wandani people served in both world wars. And then in 2016, Western Australia legislation formally recognised the Noongar cultural land connections and provided funding for cultural and educational programs. So a couple of interesting facts about Bunbury include its 19th century reputation as the Brighton of the colony, the Brighton being that beachside beachside area in England. So during the gold boom, it became a popular seaside resort for miners. And to me, it's funny. It's not really the image I have of miners, and you sort of wonder if they're lying there, whether they can't help themselves. And after the holiday period, the lifeguards are going around having to fill all these new bloody holes in the beach. Bloody miners. So he's also got a long history of shipwrecks, 29 recorded in the aptly named Shipwreck Bay. And many of those also supplied early building materials. And one event that's not really well known outside of WA was in 1976, where 2 environmental activists bombed the wood chip export terminal in the Bunbury, in what was known as the Bunbury wood chip bombing. So they had more than 1,000 sticks of gelignite that they planted. It caused damage of about $300,000. Fortunately, 2 charges failed to detonate, which limited the impact. No injuries. A security guard was held at gunpoint, though, and shrapnel hit some of the nearby residential areas. So the intention was to prevent the export of wood chips from Western Australians' old growth forest for 18 months. But the reaction was considered a serious setback for the emerging environmental movement of the time. And I've left a link in the show notes if you're interested in more details of that. But that was something that didn't really ring much of a bell for me. However, the focus of this week's Two Ticks Town Talk is a business that got its start in Bunbury. And as soon as you hear the surname of the founding brothers, you'll know what one we're talking about. So let's go way back to 1886, where a business was founded by brothers Arthur and Robert Bunning.
Yes. I know where this is going.
Yeah. So they were tradesmen who came from, emigrated from East London, and they were born into a carpenter's family. They turned up in Fremantle on the SS Elderslie in 1886, 29th of June. They were originally intending to go on to California, but they stayed on after visiting their sister and brother-in-law. So they formed the partnership Bunning Brothers in 1886 and initially won government contracts, construction contracts, and building expansions to the Fremantle Lunatic Asylum, Roeburn Hospital, the Well Club and Trinity Church in the early 1890s. And they also built up a property portfolio that included 4 brickworks. So they were hard workers, very entrepreneurial as well. So they had a lot of trouble getting jarrah timber during the export booms of the 1890s, so they decided to enter sawmilling. Bought their first sawmill in southwest Aussie in 1887 and another at North Dandalup a couple of years later, and then they got further mills across the regions, and they ended up becoming one of the largest exporters of railway sleepers in Western Australia. 1907 they incorporated as Bunning Brothers. Robert Bunning died in 1936 at a dinner in Perth, marking his 50 years in Western Australia, apparently 5 minutes into his speech, and keeled over and carked it, unfortunately. I suppose he did see how it developed to a certain stage, but yeah, a little bit of probably not the best way to celebrate. He's understating that. No. You sort of hope that this is great. I'm just looking forward to a fantastic future. Oh, feeling a bit peaky. His 3 sons, Charles, Tom and Joe, took over the family business. So despite a whole lot of challenges of World War II, during which the company pivoted to shipbuilding for the Allies, they grew after the war amid the housing boom. 1952, they became a public company, and that was Bunning Timber Holdings Proprietary Limited, and supplied timber for hundreds of thousands of homes over in WA. So they'd already secured major contracts for the timber fittings in Perth buildings in the 1930s and supply to the Eastern Goldfields and railway sleepers. But this post-war expansion was a big growth spurt for them. Set up a workshop in Manjimup, Wills in southwestern Australia, and even up as far as North Queensland. So a quick growing. The shift towards the more familiar retailing front that we know today, that started in the 1950s. So they purchased a whole lot of hardware stores and opened the first dedicated hardware store in Perth in 1961. Charles and Tom Bunning became joint managing directors in 56. And in 1970, the company acquired merchandising and sawmill operations from Hawker Siddeley, which essentially doubled their size. And then in the 1980s and 1990s, they just acquired a whole lot of other related companies. So by the 1990s, they'd actually reached the East Coast and had adopted their warehouse-style format. 1994, Wesfarmers acquired Bunnings Limited for $600 million, and that marked the beginning of its transformation into this national, international retail powerhouse. Wesfarmers opened the first big Bunnings warehouse that we know, like that we recognise now, in Melbourne in 94, and expanded rapidly, opening stores at an average rate of one every 3 months.
Whoa!
Yeah, that's crazy.
I do remember them expanding like really aggressively. Like they went from like nothing to everywhere, seemingly, in the mid to late 90s. But that's crazy.
Yeah, well, look, I mean, you probably wouldn't have. You would have been a bit more of a little tacker then.
Yeah,
but it was it was just so. It was just such a growth, a new business presence that it was just astounding to many people who were taking note at the time. So I haven't held Wesfarmers shares for a while, but that activity, it certainly incentivised me to invest at the time. It was one of those ones looking at thinking, you guys are either going to fall over or you're not stopping for a long time. So that one actually worked out well for me. They introduced the red hammer symbol in 1995, and the slogan, lowest prices are just the beginning, which is just, I think most people know that, in 1996. And in 2001, they acquired the Howard Smith Group, which included BBC Hardware and Hardware House, which were still at that time, or probably not at that time, but leading up to that time, you sort of looking, these are the big competitors, I wonder how they go. And it was almost in one fell swoop. Nope, they're all Bunnings now.
I do remember there was a hardware house. I can't remember exactly where it was, but I do remember it. I feel like we drove past it one day and the next day it had Bunnings on it. And I was just like, whoa, what the hell? Like it happened so quickly. They're so aggressive with their expansion.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. Well, and that might sound like a bit of an exaggeration to a lot of people, but they've got the team there, and you see it stop. Okay, then sit down, and then the painters come in and bang, it's up, and suddenly it's like, oh yeah, there was always a Bunnings there. It's impressive. And where are we? So 2004 to 2008 acquired the Mitre 10 saws with ACCC approval. And then Bunnings entered New Zealand with more substantially after the 2001 acquisition, growing from 3 stores before to 14 stores by 2008. So the Wesfarmers strategy, they emphasise customer focus, lower prices, widest range, best experience. They did that investment in community engagement. I mean, there's the iconic sausage sizzle that people know about and we joke about, but also the DIY workshops and things such as in-home installations and tool hire. And then during the COVID-19 period, they really launched into the click and collect and e-commerce capabilities. Yeah, they really didn't skip a beat.
No, they really didn't. They were so on top of it, which is so impressive. Like, I feel like that's just a good way to describe them. They just do what they do really, really well.
Yeah, exactly. The company's only major misstep, now they obviously have little small bits and pieces, but they had one major misstep, and it was a beauty. It was the 2016 entry into the United Kingdom and Ireland. They bought a mob over there called Homebase for £340 million. And their plans are made to rebrand stores within 5 years. So they opened their first rebranded store in St Albans in January 2017. Again, didn't really waste much time, followed by others. But the venture just failed rapidly. And then in May 2018, just a couple of years later, they sold the operation to Hilco for £1 after £1, resulting in a $1.3 billion write-down.
Wow.
Yeah. So 24 stores were rebranded back to Homebase, with some closures under voluntary administration because it was right for the pickings. So the failure was attributed to unsuitable product ranges for the UK, such as barbecues, not as popular there as here. There was an inability to understand local consumer preferences, and there was a lack of local goodwill, and that was compounded by Brexit-related challenges. And it's been described, I think justifiably, as one of the most disastrous retail acquisitions in the UK. Now, one thing I would note, though, is they bought Homebase in 2016, and despite the huge amount they'd already spent, they didn't fall in that into the trap of the sunk cost fallacy. And getting out only 2 years later, taking on the chin and moving on, to me, is a sign of strength. So my opinion is there's a very positive aspect to it, that the organisation was strong and sensible enough to look at it and say, this is only going to get worse. We've made a horrible mistake. We're out of here. That to me says a lot for a company. I know people might view it a different way, say, oh, what a big cock up. But you look at it deeper, and I think it's very telling. So,
yeah, no, I'd agree with that. They've realised that. They've realised a mistake, and like you said, they didn't go into that cost price fallacy and decided, let's just cut our losses. This isn't working. Clearly, I think they've misread the market over there, thinking
wildly.
that they could take what's been successful in Australia and New Zealand, because obviously culturally we're very similar to the UK, but clearly not enough, like that, and I briefly lived in the UK, and I can say that sort of like DIY culture is there, but it's nowhere near as strong as it is here. I feel like you see a Bunnings in even little towns, there's Bunningses. Everyone loves a Bunnings.
Yeah, exactly. So today they operate 382 stores across Australia and New Zealand. So 285 warehouses, 67 small format and 30 trade centres, plus 112 Beaumont tiles and 17 toolkit depots.
They own Beaumont tiles. I didn't know that.
Yeah. Yes. So that's for a total of 511 locations.
Wow.
Yeah. Employs approximately 53,000 people and holds just shy of 70% of the Australian DIY hardware market. And they generated revenue of 19.6 billion with net income of 2.9 billion. So,
wow.
Yeah.
Do you know what the most
behemoth.
The most surprising part about that was that they control, what did you say, 70?
Yeah, 68%, so nearly 70%.
So almost nearly. I'm surprised that that's not higher. if I'm honest. I feel like
You're surprised that percentage isn't higher or the revenue?
yeah, no, the percentage isn't higher. I feel like Bunnings almost have a monopoly here on DIY. So it's kind of surprising. Well, I guess they almost do, but I don't know. I would have thought that would have been in the 80s, perhaps. But there you go. There's a few other hardware stores holding on.
Well, I think I think it probably comes down to how you're defining DIY. If you're doing places, if you're concluding saying places that sell tile, other wood yards, tool places like Sydney Tools and Total Tools.
No, that's a good point. Yeah.
Yeah. I think you'd be pretty happy with 70, but I get your point from first glance. So, like our two ticks town of Bunbury, Bunnings has gone from strength to strength. Bunbury from municipality to town to Western Australia's third largest city. And Bunnings from timber milling to hardware stores to one of Australia's most recognised and successful businesses. And I love that all started with a couple of brothers who thought they'd give it a crack.
What a great Australian success story. And for any of our international or Australian listeners that are wondering, the incredible animated TV series Bluey, Hammer Barn is what they call Bunnings. And Bunnings have very much leaned into that. I think they even rebranded a couple of their stores as Hammer Barn. And you can buy Hammer Barn merchandise in Bunnings, including like the gnomes from Bluey and a whole bunch of other stuff. So I went crazy a little while ago and bought a bunch of it for my daughter, who just is obsessed with Bluey. So I know a lot of our American listeners probably are quite familiar with Bluey. I believe Bluey is the number one American TV, like the number one show on American TV, period. Not just kids show, just the number one show.
Yeah.
It is wildly successful. And Hammer Barn is quite a big part of plays a role in quite a few episodes, which shows you how culturally, how big of the zeitgeist Bunnings is. We love our Bunnings. I was there today, actually, so I friggin' love the place.
Look, it's one of those things that there's a part of you sort of think, oh gosh, it was nice when you had the little hardware store and you could go in and buy, I'll have 7 of those screws and 7 of that, and there's the thing of it's a big chain thing and that. But there is so much that they get right that it's compelling.
It is, and I just like walking around in there. I don't know, like I just like going to Bunnings.
And it's not just a bloke thing either. I think there's such a range. And I think possibly, that's also part of it. There's, male or female, and for kids. I mean, they've even got those little, little trolleys for the kids. They've got if it's not a little play area, at least, areas where there can be activities for the kids. It's one of those things too where it can be, a bit of cheap entertainment, because it's exciting to our senses being surrounded with a whole lots of little interesting things. It does something to us as humans. And Bunnings isn't the only one that has lots of little interesting things. So it is something that you can recognise that, but that is part of their draw as well. And there's I don't know. Look, I'm guessing there's a lot of psychology goes into it, because there's also a sense of space. Rarely do you go in that it's uncomfortable environment. If it's really cold outside, it's not too bad inside there. If it's really hot outside, it's not too bad inside there. But it's always a bit better in than out. And I don't know how much they spend on air conditioning or whether it's design or whatever it is, but there's obviously a team of people there who's just nailed this model.
It's I would say that their energy costs, which we have spoken about before in terms of them trying to, reduce their energy costs with solar and stuff like that, because a lot of Bunnings now are what I would call like lightly air conditioned. It's not cold when you walk in, but it's definitely like there is climate control. You know, it's not to the same as other retail spaces, but it's active. It's definitely on. It takes the bite out of the humidity when you walk inside. And a lot of Bunnings like stores are colossal. They are huge. Our local one is, I've actually just measured it on Google Maps, not including the car park, just under the garden centre and the undercover roofed area is a whopping 17,500 square meters, which is approximately 4.3 acres of shed building, basically, that you can walk around in. That does include the quite a large trade centre, which is over an acre by itself. But to like as a store, it is hands down the largest single building probably in my small regional city. It rivals the size of the shopping centre just by itself as a single retail environment. So, you know, I feel like a lot of towns almost Bunnings becomes like the cultural heart of the town. Like everyone knows where the Bunnings is. It's wild. It's such a cultural cornerstone in this country. It's crazy when you think about it. But yeah, love me some Bunnings. What an interesting Two Ticks Town Talk from such humble beginnings.
Yeah, I love that.